going to be talking about how might we reimagine education. So we're going to start a little bit with just thinking about how we think about imagination and how we think about reimagining things. Today is really a workshop, so I'm not presenting. I'm not going to be giving you great, come on over, have a seat. I'm not going to be giving you like great tidbits that you can go out into the world. You are going to give each other great tidbits to go out into the world and do this work. We are going to start with just a quick discussion about what we're going to be doing today. And we know that education is where really kind of all things start, right? This is the basis of our community, is how we bring people together to educate them. And how we educate them is how they then go into society and fulfill those ongoing roles in society. If you think about your own self and where you learned most of your skills, your coping skills, your educational skills, those kinds of things, they were impacted in some way by your education. Does that sound about right? Does that resonate with folks? Okay. So what I'd like for you to do today is we're going to do something called World Cafe. How many of you have done a World Cafe type situation before? Some of you have? Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a prompt, give you kind of a situation, and then what I'd like for you to do is work together in your groups, and there's flip chart paper in the center. There is no right or wrong way to do this. You can write down, you can make a list, you can write around the corners, you can draw pictures, you can do bullet points, you can do this however, whatever makes sense for you in your mind. We're going to talk about what a reimagined, ideal school situation would look like for our young people. And you just will talk about that in your groups, and you will write that down, and then we'll kind of mix it up a little bit, and we'll go on to the next prompt and do the same thing. Does that kind of make sense for folks? Okay.
Specific age group in this first question?
Nope. It can vary. It can vary. If you have a very specific age group that you're interested in talking about, then talk about that. If you want to talk about the system as a whole, the system as a whole. Here's the one caveat that I would give you, is we're going to kick the butts out. So if you have something in there that you think is a wonderful idea, do not end it with but. So you might say, all of our schools will be beautifully painted, but we don't have money for that. No, we're just saying all of our schools should be beautifully painted, and we need the resources for that, okay? So that's the only thing I'd like for you to really be conscious of thinking. The rest of it is just like free association and think about the things that you want to think about, okay? So let me just make sure I've covered all of Jeff's points here. Okay, so very specifically, your question is, to prepare students to build the society we want, what would the ideal school day look like? What principles would guide how you design the system? Okay, do you want me to read that again? Yes. To prepare students to build the society we want, what would the ideal school day look like? What principles would guide how you design the system? And if it helps to think about things in terms of senses, sometimes if I get stuck on things, I think about what does it look like, what does it sound like, what does it smell like, what does it feel like, what does it, all of those kinds of sensory kinds of questions. But I want you to go ahead and as a group start your conversation, and either one person can be the note taker or you can all jump in and write things on your paper. Yes, I can. And I'll write it up on this board too. Okay. To prepare students to build the society we want, what would the ideal school day look like? What principles would guide how you design that system? Okay, I'm going to write it up here so you have something to check back on. Are you ready? Let's kind of come back together now. All right, everybody's so deep in conversation. I love this. But let's come back together now. That's okay. It's okay. What an adventure he is. I know, I love that. All right, so here's what I'd like for us to do. I'd like for somebody from each table just to give kind of a synopsis of what you talked about in terms of what would your ideal day look like, what would your ideal school look like, and what are some of those principles that are involved in creating that day. So who wants to go first? Okay.
So our principles are built off of valuing and practicing strong citizenship, pride and connection in our school and our community, celebrating and valuing differences of all kinds, learning abilities and diversity and socioeconomic, and servant leadership and a strong relationship between students and teachers. Our days would include a lot of peer development and mediation. So with that principle of servant leadership, project-based service learning, flexibility of choices to let students take ownership of their schedule, a lot of self-discovery, freedom to make mistakes, a lot of collaboration and teamwork opportunities, and more focused on critical thinking than recitation, active learning. So that's what a day would look like. The buildings would be clean and bright with fresh air, grass and shade on playgrounds, malleable, flexible spaces for learning environments, things that personalize the school for students like framed artwork. We would have students who are proud of their school, diverse, connected to the community, really wanting to release that fear of liability and interaction with adults outside the school system, but also to have that be curriculum driven and coached so that it's an expectation and also integrated well into the learning. An empathetic student body of confident students.
Nice, nice. What questions do you all have for their ideal school day?
We just say ditto. Ditto.
Deb, I have a question before we get to
Sure.
what are we going to do with this information? What are you going to do?
So our next piece after that is going to be a time when we take some of this information and we think about what are those small experiments that each of us can do as we go forward, and how do we help to promote this work out. So it's really, if you think of grassroots level, go down a level, okay? Because you're really starting to think about what are those things that need to happen. And I heard each one of you talk about really specific things that could, which I'm really excited to hear the next part. You each talked about really specific things that could happen to help grow these. So we're going to talk about what are those small experiments are, and then part of this all of this information will go back to our organizers, and they will have this information to help figure out any next steps. Okay? Yeah, it's not just an effort in futility today. We're trying to.
Picture of a school day.
I know. Exactly. Yes, we're all laughing at you. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Okay, with this information that we're building in this classroom, how are they going to take this information and put together, I guess, a program or whatever? Are they going to give it to our school board? Or is it just going to be for the organization? How is it going to affect our school board of Cincinnati?
That's a great question, and I think I have two answers to that, I think. One is my take on this whole day is around how do each one of you affect your school board, right? How do each one of you advocate to make change? And so when we get to the next part and you think about what are those small experiments or what are those small pieces that you can do to advocate or to make change or to push your ideas forward, that's what we're going to be talking about. So it's not giving it to an organization who is then going to go out and create a program or create, kind of a situation. It is really about how how are you going to advocate within your, whether it's your school board or whether it's your organization or the place you work, to make these changes and to make some things different. The
So
second,
are we gonna have access to all this information once put together? So we can maybe focus on some of the ideas that are coming out of today, so we can.
you know what, I am happy to share. What I'll do is in our next one, I will pass around a piece of paper. If you want to put your email on it, put your email on it. I will take all of this and kind of type them up and make them nice and neat and get them to everybody. If you, you know, you don't have to put your email on it if you don't want it, but that's a piece that I can do, and then I can share with the organizers. Do you have any ideas on how? Okay, okay. So the other thing I want to share with you is this work is being done on an ongoing basis. There is a work group through the organization Cincinnati organization. Are you? Yes, ma'am.
I'm president of Cincinnati, so it's our education panel, I'm already thinking, so
Yes.
That is our
Yes.
panel chair and.
Yes. Okay. So.
Cincinnati.
Is that like the same thing that gives out scholarships to Cincinnati students?
We also give out.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of you made it possible for me to go to college.
Very nice. See, you've got these connections. So then you know that there is this education panel that is doing this very work right now. And what I would include, I'll put this on my list. If you would like to be included in that group that meets regularly, we meet regularly. It's the
Monday,
it,
the second Monday.
second,
Each month.
virtually, and then we have an in-person meeting quarterly, and the next in-person meeting is October 19th in the evening at Cincinnati State. But if you want, I'll just put a little column, and if you want to be on that email, it doesn't obligate you to anything, but you can be part of this larger movement that's reimagining education. So I think, Andrea, that's what we're talking about, is creating kind of this groundswell of how do we do this work. And I saw that one of the sessions is about how do you advocate to your board, and how do you, that would be a good thing now that you have some ideas and some little experiments, couple that with the session on how do you advocate, and start to make those changes and make those things different. This is not going to happen overnight in any way, shape, or form. And I've heard each one of the groups has had a little bit different take on things, and you may be advocating for different types of changes and different types of work. He is a cutie. Okay, other questions about how this work will go forward? Okay. So, next group, can you tell us a little bit about what your ideal day is and some of the guiding principles you have in place?
I guess I was voted. Yes, you were.
All right.
So, again, I think ditto to everything that they said. I think we got a little bit more in the weeds with some of our visions, but I think one was making sure that every kid, that everybody knows what kids' strengths are, what their skills are, their gifts are, assets, whatever you want to call them, so that you build on those as opposed to focusing on their deficits. One of the principles for that was having, role models who could help with that, whether it's someone in the school or someone outside of the school. We had a lot of discussion around how do we ensure that these kids can write and read, because those are really critical skills for going forward. So, and then we got into the, before you even get into school, you've got that sort of prenatal to 5 space that is just so inconsistent, and that we really need to assure that. We talked a lot about ensuring that parents are educated around how they can help with their students, so they need to know what's going on in school, and then reinforce that at home, and then not saying but how do we get the resources for them to do that, and time off from work to do that. And then I think sort of towards the end we were getting into just that whole learning structure, you know, it can't be the teacher at the front and
Right.
the kids sitting here. It has to be much more self-directed, and teachers are more mentors and guides, you know, than teaching. Did I miss something?
Okay. What questions do the rest of us have for their ideal vision?
I think we probably answered the next question more than we did the vision.
It's okay. I was really interested in the fact that you went down even one layer and talked about kids that aren't in school. How do we set the stage for them to have a good experience, and they're not even there yet? So I think that was a really interesting take on this question
Well,
too.
that shifts the trajectory for kids as they enter the school system. Because if they're just trying to get caught up
Yeah.
versus if they're already there.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to that. I look around the room and I see many different age differences in this room. And so I think it's important that when we get into an educational system, there are going to be some older teachers, there are going to be some teachers that are newer, and then there's going to be even younger teachers. And it's important that they collaborate together and put all of their ideas, what we did 15 years ago, see what is working, what you all are doing now when you came out of college, and see what's working to help us, because you're the next generation and so on and so on.
Right.
And that's how you build schools, and I don't see that in our system. I didn't see it, I'm retired now, but I didn't see it, because a lot of times, and no offense to anybody, but I must say this, a lot of times we get offended with one another when we say things to the younger ones and they say things to us. So I think it's important that we learn how to gravitate toward each other and get the wisdom from each age group. And that helps build our school system.
I think a mentorship program would be awesome.
Yes.
Nice.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what
I
you
said,
said.
I think a mentorship program would be awesome because then everyone is speaking to each other.
Right.
Because just because it's an older concept doesn't mean it didn't work. Maybe it can have a new spin on it. You know, just the same way, like what happened yesterday might not work today. Every time I turn around, there's new jargon, LOLs, all this other stuff. Everything is different for everyone. And if everyone could sit down with each other and learn the reason, we don't have to always agree, but we can respect each other and understand where everyone's coming from.
Computer stuff. You know, every time we turn around, there's something different. You're like, well, I did that on my phone. Thank you, baby. You know, just help me.
I'm a social worker, and I've done work in schools, and I work at Miami University in the school-based mental health program. But I love to have social work interns. Love it, because they come in and they ask me things that I've been doing for a really long time, and I had to go, why do we do it that way? Why is that? Why is that necessary for us to jump through this hoop? And they tell me like new things they're learning. I'm like, oh, teach me that skill, or teach me that. So I totally, that resonates with me, that we need to figure out a way how to bring, newer and more seasoned people together to share both the strengths. So.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment about that. If we started off with the basic facts, scientific understandings, basic information, theoretical information, how children learn, there's so much research that's being done, and if we start off from that basis, the how comes, I think, generational and experience. But if we start out with the fundamental facts, here's what the research says about learning, this environment, and then this is how I've done it, or how I've experienced it. I think that makes the conversation a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right.
And to learn how to listen to one another. That we have a big issue with listening to other people's ideas. I'm just being honest. So we have to learn how not only hear what we're saying, but to listen. And then, like she said, research it. You know, go back and look at an old encyclopedia. Don't Google it. Look at what it said in the encyclopedia. And for us, okay, let's Google it. You know, because my mother, when she was alive, she was 83. And if I had a question for her, because she was a teacher, Google it. You know, she learned that word off of the View. But it helped me with my learning of how to go back and add what's now and what's coming and put it all together so that I could be a better
So if I were to add a principle to what you just said, I would say being humble. Being humble enough to hear what somebody else says, what they bring to the table, what they've learned, what their experience is true for them, and being humble enough to not think you know everything.
Yeah, and that's what that group said. I heard them say servant leadership, and that's one principle of servant leadership, is humility.
Right. Awesome.
Because you are in a totally different world than what I grew up. I'm like, what are they talking about? And then when they text, some of my grandkids text, I'm like, what is all of this? Pick the phone up and talk to Granny. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Well, so the flip side of that is you have to be humble enough to listen and understand there are other points of view, but then be willing to adapt.
And be willing to adapt. Yeah,
The two have to go together.
they do. They do.